HCG for 2 weeks, Clomid or Nolvadex for 2 weeks, and then 4 to 6 weeks where you're off all drugs because you have to reset your androgen receptors. I know people want to try to make up cockamamie stories about more steroids increases androgen numbers, receptor numbers. It's bullshit. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Dave did a full video on PCT, the only way to do a proper PCT. So this question is from ER Fitness. I've been blasting and cruising for 5 years. I know it's time for a break. How do I come off without completely crashing and feeling like garbage after being on for so long? I know you don't like cruising.
Yeah, you're right, Sid. I did a great video purposely because a lot of people have been asking me about this and saying, how do you deal with it mentally? And I did not only a science-based video, but it's very motivational too, to let you know that what it takes to be a bodybuilder. If you want to be a top-level bodybuilder, you're going to have to know how to take drugs and eat properly and train properly, but you're also going to know how to have to mentally deal with the fact that you have to come off cycle at least once a year and clean out for 8 weeks. And I go through the whole process of HCG for 2 weeks, Clomid or Nolvadex for 2 weeks, and then 4 to 6 weeks where you're off all drugs because you have to reset your androgen receptors. I know people want to try to make up cockamamie stories about more steroids increases androgen numbers, receptor numbers. It's bullshit. Okay, when you take away anabolics and the body senses that there's no testosterone or anabolic steroids around, the androgen receptors say, we must not have enough androgen receptors. We need to increase more. And that's why going off restores androgen sensitivity. What it really is doing is increasing androgen receptor density, meaning that your body's now producing more androgen receptors because it's trying to look for testosterone or androgenic molecules that can bind to it. If there's none around, the body says, oh, we must not have enough receptors. And it keeps making more and more and more. Now, that doesn't go on infinitely. It stops after several weeks. But it's always nice to clean out, restore androgen receptor density, and then when you go back on, you get a very strong response. How do you deal with it? Do you want to be a bodybuilder? You want to be the best bodybuilder in the world? You have to deal with it. The strong bodybuilders have never stopped. My training was just as intense, maybe not as heavy, but just as intense when I was off cycle as when I was on. My eating was even better when I was off cycle because I knew that the food intake that I was taking and the supplements that I took in were even more important now because I wasn't on all that anabolic aid. And you just have to deal with it. And if you check out the video we'll be putting up probably in the next day or two, it's going to go into a lot more detail on that. I also want to just remind people, this is one of my favorite diet sodas. If you guys are dieting, Doc Brown's cream soda. Cream is not my favorite, but there's also a black cherry version of this too. 0 sugar, 0 calories. It's a little more expensive, but when you're dieting, you feel like you're cheating. It's great.
Is site rotation with HGH as necessary? Scar tissue not an issue with smaller gauge needles?
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily have to rotate sites. I always did it because, eventually you start getting a little, sore in that one area. I would just go from shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes I'd go under the skin of my legs. I'd move it around. But, I mean, usually what I call you have Old Faithful. You have a spot that you're just comfortable doing. It's like you use that spot almost all the time. The only time I'll switch from that spot is if I start seeing maybe I'm getting some marks there, or it's like it's starting to get a little lumpy or something like that, maybe because I'm sticking the same needle. I'm sticking a needle in every single time in the same spot. But the truth is that the easiest place to inject GH is just right into your shoulders, you know, boom, boom, boom. And it doesn't leave any marks. People who shoot in their abs, you get these little marks all over your abs, and it just doesn't look good. It's not aesthetic, especially if you're going to be on a bodybuilding stage, hitting a front double bicep and your abs are on display for the world. I wouldn't shoot anything into my abs if I were you.
Does nicotine, either by cigarette or vape, prevent muscle growth, even if diet, training, and gear, everything is on point?
I don't think it inhibits muscle growth per se, but I think it's not good for you. We know it's not good for your health. Nicotine is what, you know, when we say smoking is bad for your heart, yeah, the actual act of smoking a cigarette, which most people don't do anymore, most people vape, right? Smoking the cigarette is bad for your lungs because you're inhaling all that, you know, that crap into your lungs. But the actual nicotine that's going into your system is what's bad for your heart because it constricts the vessels, it restricts oxygen flow to your heart. And long term, there's a lot of negative side effects that can lead to increased cardiac problems down the road. So then, yes, nicotine is not good for your body. Is it going to inhibit muscle growth? Probably not. But I wouldn't. That's not a license to be vaping nicotine all day long. It's just not smart.
Training related question: your favorite exercises for shoulder width?
Well, you know, my belief was I always start all my shoulder workouts with some kind of a pressing movement. So whether these days I do dumbbell presses overhead. I used to, back in the day, I used to do behind the neck barbell presses. I really love those. I really think those build muscle better than anything. I know nowadays a lot of people don't do it because they know it's not great for your shoulders, but most people do it to the front. But I loved behind the neck presses. I thought that was great. But what I like the most, and I think that really targets the side deltoid head, is when you get on the machine that has the pads where you can kind of do this, except I don't do two arms at one time. I get under one pad and I kind of lean into it and I do as heavy weight as I can. And you know what the great thing about that machine is that because the pad is sitting on your elbow, your hand is not holding the weight or the pad, and if you're pushing exclusively from your shoulder, you can't cheat. It's impossible to cheat unless you start shrugging your trap. But assuming you're not using your trap, it's all side delt. And if you start lifting real heavy with that machine, it's so isolating, you cannot help but not build your delts. People always ask me, how are your delts so big, you know, through your entire career, especially at the end of your career when your shoulders were so bad? I said, at the end of my career, I wasn't even shoulder pressing anymore. I was just doing that machine. And for some reason, when that machine sat over here, it stabilized my shoulder. So I was able to, despite the fact that I had bad joints, I was able to actually still work my deltoid using that. And I got great results. And I was very strong like that. It kept my size on my shoulder. So I think that if more people did that machine, I actually like that machine. And I use it for rear delts too. I've shown this before. I kind of get behind it. I put the pad on the back of my arm and I lift back with it too. And that gives me a great pump in the rear delt. Because I think it's hard to isolate rear delts. A lot of guys do bent over, you know, dumbbells or bent over cables, but you invariably wind up using your traps a lot on that. When you do this machine, once again, you can't cheat. You're just using your rear delt as you pull backwards. So give it a shot.
Why does growth hormone before bed seem to help with sleep quality?
You know, I don't agree with that actually, because when I used to take GH before bed, it would keep me up at night because what it does is it drops blood sugar. Because when you first take GH, you get that IGF release, which has an insulin-like effect, and it can lower your blood sugar, and sometimes that can disrupt your sleep. I guess if you have a huge meal before bed and you take it, you might not feel it, but especially when dieting, I used to notice it. And then I said to myself, well, you know, at night, your body naturally produces GH, right? So why would you take GH at night if your body's already producing it naturally? When does your body not produce GH? Well, it doesn't produce GH in the morning. The morning is when you're the most catabolic. You produce the most cortisol, the most catabolic hormones. So I said, you know what? Let's neutralize that catabolic state. Take the GH in the morning when your body naturally would not produce it. And that's the best time. So that's when I have most of my guys take the GH first thing in the morning when they wake up. Because GH is naturally produced mostly after training and at night. So I think that's the silliest time to take it, really, you know, if you think about it.